200 people laughed at me on a Sunday afternoon in Sugar Land, Texas. Not the polite kind of laugh, not the uncomfortable kind either, the full kind. The kind where someone slaps their knee, the kind where somebody's drink almost comes out their nose. My father had just handed my sister Keisha a Rolex date just $14,000 rose gold, fresh out of the box, in front of the entire Calloway family reunion. The room was still clapping when he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a crinkled sandwich bag, and held it up for everyone to see. "We found something at Goodwill that matches your whole vibe, baby girl." Inside the bag was a small gold watch, scratched, old, worth nothing as far as anyone in that room was concerned. Keisha started recording on her phone. 200 people watched me accept it with a straight face. My name is Aaliyah Calloway. And 6 weeks after that Sunday, I was standing in the Christie's auction room on Post Oak Boulevard in Houston, and the number on that screen silenced every single person in the building. What my father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Big Mama Odessa had been waiting a long time to have the last word. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to where it all started. The Calloways are what people in Houston call a made family. Not old money, not inherited. The kind of made that comes from Raymond Calloway working construction crews in Third Ward at 22 years old, learning every trade, saving every dollar, and eventually building his own company, Calloway General Contracting, from a pickup truck and a handshake. By the time I was born, the company had 12 employees and a reputation across the Southeast Side. By the time I was 10, they had 63 employees and an office building off Alameda Road with the name on the door in brushed gold letters. My father built something real. I never disputed that. What he built inside the house was a different story. We moved to Sugar Land when I was 9, a 4-bedroom colonial on a cul-de-sac with a 2-car garage and a backyard big enough for the annual Calloway reunion. The neighborhood was mostly Black professionals, doctors, engineers, school principals. Raymond fit right in. He liked being seen. He liked being the man who made it out of Third Ward and had the zip code to prove it. My mother, Cheryl, ran the household the way Raymond ran his job sites, with total control and zero tolerance for deviation. She organized the church fundraisers at New Hope Baptist. She knew every neighbor's business before they knew it themselves. She had opinions about everything: how you dressed, how you spoke, who you associated with, what your presence said about the family name. There were 4 of us: Raymond, Cheryl, Keisha, and me. Keisha was 33 to my 29. 4 years older, and in every way that mattered inside that house 4 rungs higher on a ladder I was never told existed. From the outside, the difference between us was simple. Keisha had my mother's complexion, warm medium brown, what the older women at New Hope Baptist called a pretty color. She had Cheryl's cheekbones and Raymond's confidence, and the kind of easy smile that made rooms tilt toward her. I had Big Mama Odessa's complexion, deep brown, the kind of brown that Houston's sun turns almost blue-black in July. The older women at church had a different set of words for that. They didn't always say them out loud. They didn't have to. I was 7 years old the first time I understood that my skin was a problem in my own house. We were getting ready for Easter Sunday. Cheryl had laid out Keisha's dress on the bed, first pale yellow eyelet with white patent leather shoes and a little hat with a ribbon. Then she turned to me and held up a navy dress with a Peter Pan collar. "Navy's better for your complexion," she said. Matter of fact, like she was talking about paint swatches. Keisha got yellow, I got navy. Keisha was the Easter photo. I was the background. I told myself it was just a dress. I almost believed it. That pattern Keisha in the front, Aaliyah in the back, repeated itself so consistently over the next 20 years that it stopped feeling like cruelty and started feeling like weather. Something you didn't cause and couldn't change. Something you just dressed for. Raymond's version of it was quieter than Cheryl's, but cut deeper. He wasn't a yelling man. He expressed preference the way contractors express it on a job site through resource allocation, where he put his time, his money, his attention. Keisha got the resources. I got the leftovers when there were any. For Keisha's 16th birthday, a surprise party in the backyard with 35 guests, a DJ, a 3-tier cake from Creme de la Creme Bakery on Westheimer, and a brand new Honda Civic with a white bow on the hood. Raymond stood next to it with his arm around Keisha and cried. Actual tears. I had never seen my father cry before that day. For my 16th birthday, a sheet cake from the HEB on Highway 90. Generic frosting. My name spelled wrong Aaliyah instead of Alia, and a $40 gift card to Target. Cheryl said money was tight that year. That same month, she bought Keisha a $280 pair of Air Force Ones because she needed them for school. Keisha had a 2.6 GPA that semester. I had a 3.9. Nobody mentioned the GPA. Cheryl mentioned the shoes at church the following Sunday. I learned not to bring report cards home with expectation. I learned to put them face down on the kitchen counter and walk away before anyone picked them up. If they noticed, they noticed. If they didn't, at least I wasn't standing there waiting. I learned to celebrate quietly, to need less, to take up less space. I told myself it didn't matter. I almost believed it. The one place it never felt like weather was Big Mama Odessa's house in Galveston. Big Mama Odessa, Callaway Raymond's mother, lived 45 miles south of Sugar Land, in a small wood frame house 2 blocks from the seawall. The house smelled like ginger snap cookies and motor oil, and something older underneath both had something that came from the walls themselves. She had lived there for 51 years. She had raised 4 children there, buried a husband there, and kept every piece of furniture her own mother had left her. She also had clocks, everywhere. Mantel clocks, wall clocks, a grandfather clock in the hallway that gonged on the hour and made me jump every single time until I was 11. On the shelf above her sewing table, she kept the smaller ones, pocket watches, wristwatches pieces in various states of repair laid out on squares of chamois cloth like they were sleeping. Raymond thought it was clutter. He said so every Christmas. Big Mama Odessa smiled at him, the way she smiled at things that didn't deserve a real response. I thought it was the most beautiful room I had ever seen. I started going down to Galveston on my own when I was 14. Bus to the Metro Rail to the Greyhound to Galveston. Cheryl didn't ask why. Raymond didn't ask at all. I think they were quietly relieved to have me out of the house for a weekend. Big Mama Odessa always had a plate waiting. She always had a chair pulled up to the work table. And she always said the same thing when I walked through the door. There she is, the one with the eyes. I didn't know what she meant yet, but I was starting to pay attention. Big Mama Odessa didn't laugh at that reunion last July. She was the only one who didn't. And that night she pulled me aside and said 5 words I wouldn't fully understand for another year. Baby, this is almost time. The summer I turned 17, I decided I was going to be somebody. Not to prove anything to Raymond, not to make Cheryl proud at church. I decided for myself quietly the way I did most things sitting at the work table in Big Mama Odessa's Galveston kitchen with a pocket watch movement, spread across a square of chamois cloth learning how to count teeth on a gear the size of my thumbnail. Big Mama was teaching me to read the story a watch tells, if you know where to look. Serial numbers hallmarks the weight of the case in your palm. She said every timepiece had a biography. You just had to learn the language. I wrote everything down in a spiral notebook. I filled 3 of them by the time I graduated high school. By senior year, I had a 3.8 GPA 2 AP credits and a letter of acceptance to the University of Texas at Austin, full academic scholarship tuition housing meal plan. I had applied without telling anyone, filled out every form myself, driven to the post office on my lunch break to mail the financial aid documents before Cheryl could intercept them. The letter arrived on a Thursday in March. I set it on the kitchen counter face up and stood back. Raymond picked it up. Read it. Set it back down. UT Austin, he said. Not a question, not congratulations either. Full scholarship, I said. Everything covered. He nodded slowly the way he nodded at subcontractor bids he wasn't impressed by. Then he folded the letter back into the envelope and went to watch the game. That Sunday at New Hope Baptist, Pastor Gaines asked the congregation to share good news. Cheryl stood up. She talked for 4 minutes about Keisha's acceptance to Prairie View A&M University. She talked about the campus tour they'd taken, the dormitory, the HBCU legacy, how Raymond's company was covering full tuition and a housing stipend. The whole congregation clapped. Sister Dorothy from the choir stood up and started singing a verse of "We've Come This Far by Faith." I sat in the 3rd pew and watched my mother take her bow. When Pastor Gaines asked if there was anything else, Cheryl sat down and smoothed her skirt. She did not stand back up. I was holding my UT Austin acceptance letter in my purse. I had brought it specifically because I thought, I genuinely thought that this Sunday might be different. I put it back in my purse. I folded my hands in my lap. I watched the light come through the stained glass and tried to find something to hold on to in the colors. After service, Sister Dorothy found me in the parking lot. "I heard you got into UT Baby," she said. She squeezed both my hands. "Your grandmother told me. She is so proud of you." I looked back at Cheryl across the parking lot, laughing with the other women, Raymond's hand on the small of her back. Neither of them looked over. "Thank you, Sister Dorothy," I said. That was the whole celebration. A parking lot. An old woman who heard it from someone else. I didn't cry until I got home and closed my bedroom door. I told myself it didn't matter. I was going to Austin. I was going to build something they couldn't ignore. But the pattern didn't stop just because I left the house. Keisha's Prairie View move-in day, Raymond rented a U-Haul, loaded it himself, drove 4 hours with Cheryl in the passenger seat. They bought Keisha a new comforter set from Pottery Barn, a mini fridge, a desk lamp, and a full-length mirror. They took her to dinner at a steakhouse in Prairie View before driving home. Raymond posted 11 photos on Facebook. The caption on the last one said, "My daughter, my heart, go get it, baby." My UT Austin move-in day, I took the Greyhound, 2 suitcases, a backpack, and $17 in my checking account after buying my bus ticket. Big Mama Odessa had pressed $40 into my hand the weekend before with instructions not to tell Raymond. I used 32 of it on a shower curtain and a set of twin sheets from the Target on Guadalupe Street. Nobody came. Nobody called until the following Tuesday, and that was Cheryl reminding me that I needed to update my address for the dental insurance before the end of the month. I stood in my dorm room, a 9 by 12 box, with a cinder block wall and a window that faced a parking structure, and I made myself a promise. I was not going to spend the next 4 years waiting for them to show up. I was going to learn everything I could earn, everything I needed, and build a life so solid that no one would ever be able to shake it with a laugh in a sandwich bag. I kept that promise. Mostly, I declared a double major in art history and business. My professor thought it was an odd combination. My advisor suggested I pick one. I kept both. I was thinking about Big Mama Odessa's work table, the way she understood that a beautiful object was also a financial instrument, that history and value lived in the same body. I wanted to understand both languages fluently. I worked 3 jobs junior year: campus library on Monday, and Wednesday mornings a coffee shop off 6th Street 4 evenings a week, and weekends at a small antique mall on South Congress, where the owner, a 70-year-old Vietnamese-American woman named Mrs. Pam, paid me $9 an hour to catalog estate items and learned fast that I could identify a piece of silver by its hallmark faster than she could. Mrs. Pam started giving me more responsibility. Then more. By spring semester, she was letting me handle the watch cases entirely on my own. She called me the girl with the educated eyes. I thought of Big Mama Odessa every single time she said it. My GPA graduated at 3.8, magna cum laude. I walked across that stage in May in a rented gown with $43 in my bank account and 0 people in the audience who shared my last name. Big Mama Odessa had wanted to come. Her knees had gotten bad that winter. The drive from Galveston was too much, the doctor said. She called me the night before, and her voice was thick in the way it got when she was holding something in. "I am so proud of you, baby girl," she said. "I need you to hear that." "I hear you, Big Mama." "No." A pause. "I need you to really, really hear it. Put it somewhere inside you where it can't be taken out." I held the phone tight against my ear in my empty dorm room. The last of my things already boxed the overhead light, making everything look institutional and temporary. I pressed the words into myself the way she said to. I tried to make them permanent. Raymond did not come to graduation. Cheryl texted me at 11:17 that morning. "Congratulations, drive safe coming home." Keisha sent a gif of a graduation cap. I walked across the stage alone, shook the dean's hand, and thought, I'm just getting started. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known yet, was that Raymond had not come to my graduation because he had spent that same morning at a title company in Sugar Land, signing over a $45,000 gift to Keisha for the down payment on a Midtown Houston condo. I found out 3 months later, by accident. I overheard it at Thanksgiving. The worst part wasn't the money. The worst part was realizing he had made the appointment weeks in advance. He had chosen deliberately to be at that title company instead of in that auditorium. That was the moment something cracked open inside me. Not broke cracked, just enough to let the cold air in. I didn't know it then, but the Thanksgiving conversation was only the beginning of what I would eventually learn about how little I had ever factored into my father's calculations. After graduation, I moved back to Houston. Not back home, I was clear about that distinction from the start. I found a studio apartment in Midtown, $560 a month, third floor windows, that faced an alley, a kitchen the size of a closet. I bought a secondhand mattress and a folding table from the Salvation Army on Main Street and set up my laptop on a cardboard box the first 2 weeks while I waited for a real desk to come available on Facebook Marketplace. It wasn't much, but it was mine in a way that the house in Sugarland never had been. I landed a job at Christie's Houston through a connection Mrs. Pam had built over 30 years in the antique business. She called the head of the decorative arts department on my behalf and told her she was sending someone worth talking to. The position was catalog assistant entry level, mostly administrative heavy on research and light on everything else. The pay was $38,000 a year, which in Houston in 2019 was enough to cover rent, groceries, bus fare, and almost nothing else. I took it without hesitation. Christie's was a different kind of education. The building on Post Oak Boulevard had the particular silence of a place that takes itself seriously, hushed hallways, controlled lighting, the smell of old paper, and climate-controlled air. I spent my first 6 months cataloging estate items, writing provenance descriptions, cross-referencing auction records. I was good at the research, faster than anyone expected. My supervisor, a sharp-tongued woman named Dr. Patricia Weston, told me in my 3-month review that I had the most precise eye for detail she had seen in a junior staff member in years. I wrote that down in my notebook and read it back to myself on hard nights. Meanwhile, back in Sugarland, Keisha's life was expanding the way a well-funded life does, smoothly, without visible effort on a foundation someone else had poured. The $45,000 down payment had gotten her a one-bedroom condo in Midtown, 3 blocks from where I was renting my studio. I found this out not from Raymond or Cheryl, but from a cousin who mentioned it at a 4th of July cookout casually, the way you mention things you assume everyone already knows. I did not already know. I stood by the cooler holding a can of Sprite and kept my face neutral while my cousin described the condo's granite countertops and the rooftop pool access, and how Raymond had helped Keisha pick out furniture on a Saturday afternoon. "Your daddy loves doing stuff like that," my cousin said warmly, meaning it as a compliment. I took a long sip of Sprite. "Yeah," I said, "he does." 6 months after that cookout, I asked Raymond for $2,000. Not a gift, a loan. I had found a set of professional watchmaking tools, a Swiss-made loop, a set of movement holders, a timing machine at an estate sale in River Oaks priced at $2,300 for the full kit. Tools like that normally ran $4,000 to $5,000 new. For the work I was trying to develop on the side, private consultations, weekend authentication sessions that Mrs. Pam had been routing my way, these tools were not optional. They were infrastructure. I had a plan. I had a repayment timeline written out on a legal pad. I brought it to Raymond's office on a Tuesday afternoon, sat across from his desk, and presented it the way I had seen him present proposals to clients, clean, specific numbers, forward. He listened. He looked at the legal pad. He leaned back in his chair. "That's not a real career, Aaliyah." He said it the way you say something you've said before to yourself many times. Settled, decided. "When are you going to get something, stable benefits?" "A 401k, something I can tell people about." "I have a salary position at Christie's," I said. "Catalog work." He waved a hand. "That's not a career, that's a hobby with a paycheck." I looked at the legal pad on his desk, the repayment schedule I had spent 2 evenings drafting. "So that's a no?" I said. "That's a figure it out yourself." I picked up the legal pad, folded it in half, and put it in my bag. I thanked him for his time genuinely, without sarcasm, because Big Mama Odessa had raised me to leave rooms with my dignity intact, and I drove back to my studio apartment and sat on my secondhand mattress and stared at the wall for a long time. The following month, Raymond wrote Keisha a check for $8,000 because she wanted to redecorate the Midtown condo. New furniture, new fixtures, a custom bookshelf she had seen on Pinterest. I found out because Cheryl posted the before and after photos on Facebook with the caption, "Supporting our baby's vision, so proud of this one." I saved up for the watchmaking tools myself. It took 11 months. I bought them from the estate sale contact directly after convincing him to hold them paying $200 a month until the balance was clear. When the full kit finally sat on my folding table in that studio apartment, I ran my hand across the leather case and felt something settle in my chest. Not triumph exactly, but something quieter and more permanent. I had earned every single piece. Those tools changed everything. Word spread through Houston's collector community faster than I expected a young woman at Christie's who could authenticate vintage timepieces, available for private consultations on weekends, deeply knowledgeable, reasonably priced. My client list grew from 3 to 12 to 27 over 18 months. I started recognizing names: estate attorneys, private collectors, a retired surgeon in River Oaks who had inherited his grandfather's watch collection and needed every piece documented for insurance purposes. Dr. Weston noticed the change in me. She started routing more complex catalog items my way. A collection of Swiss pocket watches from a Tanglewood estate, a set of mid-century dress watches from a deceased professor's home in the museum district. Each one I handled like a conversation, listening to what the object was trying to tell me, cross-referencing everything, building the most complete provenance record I could. Through all of it, I kept going to Galveston. Big Mama Odessa's health had begun a slow, quiet decline in my second year at Christie's. Her knees first, then her heart, nothing catastrophic, just the gradual dimming that comes with 82 years of living. She moved more slowly. She tired more easily. But at her work table with a watch movement open in front of her and her loop on her eye, she was still the sharpest person I had ever known. Those visits became the architecture of my weeks. I would drive down on Saturday mornings with a bag of groceries she liked: speckled butter beans, canned peaches, a specific brand of herbal tea from a shop on Seawall Boulevard, and we would spend the afternoon at the table. She would show me something, I would ask questions. She would answer some of them directly and leave others hanging in the air, like she was waiting to see if I would reach for them. One Saturday in late autumn, about 14 months before she passed, she reached into the drawer beneath the work table and pulled out a small notebook. Black cover, soft from handling. She set it on the cloth in front of her, but kept her hand on top of it. "I've been writing things down for you," she said. "For a while now." "What kind of things?" "Everything I know." She looked at me over her loupe. "And the things your grandfather Joseph taught me, the things I figured out myself after he was gone, prices I kept records of, pieces I saw, pieces I passed on and regretted." She paused. "And one piece I never passed on." Because I was waiting. Waiting for what? She put the notebook back in the drawer. "For the right time," she said, "and for the right person to give it to." She closed the drawer and picked up the watch movement on the cloth in front of her, turning it toward the light. "You keep coming down here, baby. You keep learning. The rest will take care of itself." I wanted to ask more. I always wanted to ask more. But Big Mama Odessa had a way of closing a subject that made you understand the conversation was over, not unkindly, just finally, like a watch case snapping shut. I drove home that Saturday with the windows down, the Gulf air still in my clothes, turning her words over and over. One piece I never passed on. Because I was waiting. 3 months later, Big Mama Odessa mailed me a small package. Inside was the black notebook. No letter, no explanation. Just the notebook wrapped in brown paper with my name written on the front in her careful, old-fashioned cursive. She passed away on a Tuesday morning in February, 11 days after the package arrived. I hadn't opened the notebook yet. Big Mama Odessa's funeral was held on a Saturday morning at New Hope Baptist. The church was full. That surprised me, not because she wasn't loved, but because I had underestimated how far her love had traveled. People came from Galveston, from Houston, from Beaumont and Port Arthur, and one elderly woman who had driven alone from Shreveport, Louisiana, because Big Mama Odessa had been her closest friend for 47 years. And there was no version of that Saturday where she wasn't in that pew. The choir sang "Going Up Yonder." Pastor Gaines read from the 23rd Psalm, and then set his Bible down and spoke about her from memory without notes for 22 minutes. He talked about the way she listened, the way she gave quietly without announcement, without any expectation of acknowledgement. He talked about her hands, how many broken things those hands had fixed over 82 years, and how fixing broken things had been for Josephine. He used her full name only at the end, an act of worship. I sat in the second row and held myself very still. Raymond cried. Genuinely this time, not the performative tears he had shed at Keisha's 16th birthday, but the unguarded kind that come when something is truly gone, and the body understands it before the mind does. He had loved his mother. I never doubted that. The tragedy of Raymond Calloway was not that he was incapable of love. It was that his love had a hierarchy, and I had spent my whole life near the bottom of it. Cheryl kept a hand on his arm throughout the service. Keisha sat on his other side in a black dress and pearl earrings, dabbing her eyes with a folded tissue. She and Big Mama Odessa had never been close. Big Mama had seen through Keisha with the particular clarity she reserved for things that weren't what they presented themselves to be, but Keisha understood the optics of grief and performed them flawlessly. I did not perform anything. I just sat there and let myself feel the size of what was gone. After the service, we gathered at Big Mama Odessa's house in Galveston for the repast. The neighbors had organized it. Her block had apparently been doing this for each other for decades, a tradition that predated anyone currently living on the street. Folding tables in the living room loaded with food, baked chicken, butter beans, potato salad, cornbread, 3 different cobblers. The grandfather clock in the hallway had been stopped at the hour of her passing, the way the old people did. The work table in the back room had been cleared and covered with a white cloth. I stood in the doorway of that back room for a long moment. Without the watches on it, without the chamois squares and the tools, and Big Mama Odessa's loop sitting at its customary angle on the upper right corner, the table looked like a different piece of furniture entirely. Smaller somehow. Just wood. The will was read the following Thursday at an attorney's office in Galveston. The room held Raymond, Cheryl, Keisha, 2 of Raymond's brothers, Uncle Curtis and Uncle Leroy, and me. The attorney, a compact man in his 60s named Harold Beaumont, read through it with practiced efficiency. The house and property in Galveston, valued at $180,000, went to Raymond as the eldest surviving child. The furniture was divided among the siblings. Jewelry to be split between Cheryl and Keisha, and 2 of Big Mama Odessa's nieces who were not present. A small savings account, $11,000, to be divided equally among the grandchildren. Then Harold Beaumont looked up from the document and said, "To my granddaughter, Aaliyah June Calloway, the watch in the blue velvet box on my nightstand. She will know what to do with it." The room was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then, Renee. Cheryl leaned toward Raymond and murmured something I wasn't meant to hear, but did that old thing baby girl got gypped. Keisha reached across to the nightstand where Harold Beaumont had placed the box during setup. She picked it up before anyone could object, turned it over in her hands, and wrinkled her nose. "Is this even gold?" She held it toward the light. "Looks raggedy. The clasp is broken." "Give it to your sister," Raymond said quietly, and for a moment, just a moment, I thought I heard something in his voice. Discomfort, maybe. Or the early rumble of a conscience stirring. Keisha set it down on the table in front of me without ceremony, the way you set down something you've already decided has no value. I picked it up. The box was blue velvet, worn soft at the corners from years of handling. I opened it. Inside was a small wristwatch, gold case no larger than a quarter, white dial with a faint blue-white luminosity that had nothing to do with any treatment or coating I could immediately identify. It was in the enamel itself, fired that way, a technique that had been largely abandoned by the 1960s because of how labor-intensive it was. The hands were blued steel, a detail so fine they seemed almost painted on. The crown was small and precise, and sat at exactly the angle it was designed to sit. There was no brand name visible on the dial. I turned it over. On the case back, engraved in the careful script of someone who had taken their time, J. C. 1955. For the one who sees. Joseph Calloway, my grandfather, 1955. I closed the box. I put it in my bag. All of that, driving to Galveston, Keisha said lightly, gathering her things. "And that's what you got." She smiled, not meanly, which was almost worse. Just casually. "The way you comment on the weather." I did not respond. There was nothing to say in that room to those people at that moment. I drove home to Houston with the blue velvet box on the passenger seat. The sun was going down over Galveston Bay as I crossed the causeway, turning the water the particular shade of copper that only happens in February on the Gulf Coast, low and flat and wide. I kept my eyes on the road and my hand near the box without touching it. That night I sat at my work table, the same folding table I had bought at the Salvation Army 4 years earlier, upgraded now with a proper light and a mounted loop arm. And I opened the box again. I cleaned the case with a soft cloth the way Big Mama Odessa had taught me. Light pressure, circular motion working from the center outward. The gold warmed under my hands. The hairline scratch near the crown became visible, a single fine line old settled into the metal like a crease in skin. I had seen scratches like that before, on pieces that had been worn, loved, carried close. I turned the watch over and looked at the case back under my loop. The engraving, first JC 1955, for the one who sees, then the hallmark. I moved the loop to the edge of the case back where the case met the lugs. My hand went still. I moved the loop 1 millimeter to the left. There it was, 3 interlocking P's. The Geneva seal, a serial number in a format I had memorized from 2 years of cataloging Swiss estate pieces at Christie's. I set the loop down on the cloth. I picked it back up. I looked again. The hallmark did not change. Patek Philippe. I sat back in my chair. The apartment was completely silent. Outside, a car passed on the street below and its headlights swept briefly across the ceiling. And then it was dark again and quiet again, and I was alone with a watch that my father's family had just dismissed as an old raggedy thing in a velvet box. I thought about Keisha's voice. Is this even gold? I thought about Cheryl's murmur. Baby girl got gypped. I thought about my father's face at the auction table, already moving on, already calculating the Galveston property value in his head. Then I opened the black notebook. The black notebook was 43 pages long. I know because I counted them that night, sitting at my folding table at 11:47 in the evening, with the watch in its blue velvet box to my left and a cold cup of tea to my right that I had forgotten to drink. 43 pages in Big Mama Odessa's handwriting, careful, deliberate, slightly slanted to the right, the way cursive looked when it was learned in a schoolroom in 1950s, Texas, when penmanship was still considered a form of character. The first section was what she had promised. Everything she knew. Serial number ranges for major Swiss manufacturers. Hallmark identifications by country and era. Notes on enamel dial construction, how to distinguish fired enamel from painted enamel under a loupe, the specific crazing pattern that appears in genuine antique enamel after decades of temperature cycling. Notes on movement finishing. Notes on caseback engravings she had personally researched. 3 pages of auction records she had clipped from newspapers and trade publications going back to 1974, each one annotated in her hand with observations about price fluctuations and provenance effects. It was a private education, 40 years of knowledge compressed into 43 pages by a woman who had never formally studied horology but had spent a lifetime paying attention. I read every word. Then I reached the final page. Her handwriting was slightly different there, written more recently, the ink a different shade, the letters a little more effortful in the way handwriting becomes when the hands are older and the joints less cooperative. But the words were precise. She had chosen each one. Baby, your grandfather Joseph bought this watch in Geneva, Switzerland in the summer of 1955. He was 26 years old. He had traveled there as part of a stevedore crew moving cargo. He was one of 6 men, all of them, black all of them, working below decks on a merchant vessel out of Galveston. They had 3 days in port. On the second day, Joseph went walking through the city alone. He found a market near the old town outdoor stalls, estate goods, the kind of place where families sell things they no longer understand the value of. A man was selling watches from a folding table. He had maybe 30 pieces laid out on a cloth. Joseph picked this one up because the dial was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen in his life. He said it looked like the inside of a cloud. The man wanted $8. Joseph offered $5. The man took it. Joseph wore it every Sunday for 11 years. Then the crown cracked and he couldn't afford the repair, and he put it in the blue velvet box and kept it. He always meant to fix it. He never got around to it before he passed. I kept it because it was his. I kept it in the box because I didn't want it touched by people who wouldn't understand what they were touching. I kept it for you because you are the only person in this family who learned the language. The crown can be repaired. The movement is original. The dial has never been touched. I don't know what it's worth today. I looked once years ago and the number scared me enough that I stopped looking. I think you will know what to do with it better than I ever could. Whatever you decide, keep it, sell it, let it take you somewhere. I want you to know one thing first. I saw you from the time you were small. I saw what you were. And I saw what this family did with what you were. And I am sorry I wasn't loud enough about it while I was still here to be loud. You were never the one who needed fixing. They were. All my love, Big Mama, I read it once, twice, 3 times. The words did not change. I set the notebook down on the cloth beside the watch, and I pressed both hands flat on the table, and I breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way you breathe when you are trying to keep something from breaking open too fast. From somewhere outside from the street 3 floors below, or from the apartment next door, or from somewhere further than either, I heard the faint sound of a gospel song. I couldn't make out the words, just the shape of it, the call and response underneath. I thought about what Big Mama Odessa used to say after Sunday service at New Hope Baptist in the car on the way back to Galveston when I was 14 and 15 and 16 and riding with her because I preferred her company to anyone else's. She would hum a few bars of whatever the choir had sung, and then she would say, without preamble, without connection to anything visible, "Baby, God don't waste nothing He put in you." I had heard it so many times I had stopped really hearing it. The way you stop hearing a clock tick in a room you live in. Sitting at that table at midnight with 43 pages of her knowledge in front of me and a 1955 Patek Philippe in a blue velvet box that my sister had called raggedy, I heard it for the first time. God don't waste nothing He put in you. I picked up the watch. I held it under the loop one more time, not because I needed to confirm what I had already confirmed, but because I wanted to see it clearly. The enamel dial, the blued steel hands, the 3 interlocking P's on the caseback, small and certain and unmistakable. The serial number that placed it definitively in the mid-1950s production range. The original crown cracked at the stem exactly as Big Mama Odessa had described, but repairable by any competent watchmaker with access to period-correct parts. The movement, I had no doubt, would be original. Untouched. 68 years of careful storage in a blue velvet box in a Galveston bedroom had done what museum-quality climate control does for far more famous objects, preserved it almost perfectly. I set the watch down. I opened my laptop. Christie's auction records, Geneva. Patek Philippe reference 2526, original enamel dial. I had pulled these records before for estate work. I knew the range. The most recent comparable sale had closed at $312,000. That was 14 months ago. The market for mid-century Patek Philippe with original dials had been climbing steadily for 3 years. $312,000 for something my father had put in a sandwich bag, for something my sister had called raggedy, for something the entire Calloway family had watched me accept like it was a punchline. I sat with that number for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt something quieter and stranger, a kind of reckoning. Like standing in a room you have lived in your whole life and suddenly understanding the true dimensions of it for the first time. I thought about the $40 gift card on my 16th birthday, while Raymond cried over Keisha's Honda Civic. I thought about Cheryl smoothing her skirt in the pew at New Hope Baptist, while I held my UT Austin letter in my purse. I thought about Raymond's hand waving at my legal pad. That's not a real career. I thought about Keisha's phone pointed at my face in the backyard in Sugarland. I thought about every Sunday in that church where I had been the background. Then I thought about Big Mama Odessa at her work table, loop on her eye, turning a watch movement toward the light. There she is, the one with the eyes. I made 2 decisions that night. The first, I would submit the watch to Christie's for formal authentication and auction consideration, not as an employee but as a client. Clean and separate. Professional. The second, I would send 1 invitation to the auction. Hand addressed. No explanation. Just the date, the location, and the lot number. Addressed to Raymond Calloway, Sugarland, Texas. Let him come. Let him see. I closed the laptop. I put the watch back in its blue velvet box. I turned off the light above the work table. For the first time since Big Mama Odessa passed, I slept through the entire night. Something had shifted inside me. Something that would never shift back. The Monday morning after Big Mama Odessa's funeral, I walked into Christie's Houston and booked an appointment with the watch department, not through the staff entrance. through the front door the way a client does, past the security desk, past the display cases in the lobby, up to the reception counter on the second floor, where a young woman in a blazer asked how she could help me. I told her I had a piece I wanted assessed for potential auction consideration. She handed me a form. I filled it out with my personal information, not my employee details. Aaliyah June Calloway, private client. I listed the piece as a vintage Swiss wristwatch, circa 1955, gold case, enamel dial, provenance documented. I handed the form back. She told me someone from the watch specialist team would contact me within 5 business days. I took the elevator back down to the catalog floor, sat at my desk, and spent the rest of the morning writing provenance descriptions for a set of Victorian silver serving pieces from a River Oaks estate. Nobody knew what was in my bag. The call came in 3 days, not 5. The voice on the other end belonged to a man named Franklin Okafor, senior specialist in the watch and timepiece department, a Nigerian-American man in his late 40s who had been at Christie's for 19 years and whose assessments were considered among the most authoritative in the southern United States market. I had seen him in the building hundreds of times. We had exchanged professional pleasantries at department meetings. He did not know what I was bringing in. We met in one of the private assessment rooms on the 4th floor, a small, deliberately neutral space with controlled lighting, a felt-covered table, and the kind of quiet that exists only in rooms built for close looking. I set the blue velvet box on the table and opened it. Franklin Okafor looked at the watch for approximately 4 seconds without touching it. Then he put on his loupe. He examined the dial first, then the case, then the crown. Then he turned it over and studied the case back for a long time, longer than the other elements. And I watched his face with the particular attention I had learned from Big Mama Odessa, the attention you give to things that are telling you something important. His face did not change expression exactly, but something in his posture shifted, a small controlled adjustment, the kind that happens when a professional is working hard to keep their reaction proportionate to the setting. He set the watch down. He removed his loupe. "Where did this come from?" he asked. I told him. All of it, Joseph Calloway, Geneva, 1955. The market stall, the blue velvet box in a Galveston bedroom for 68 years. I slid the final page of Big Mama Odessa's notebook across the table, the one in her handwriting. He read it without comment. "I'm going to need to bring Dr. Weston in," he said. Dr. Patricia Weston, my direct supervisor in the decorative arts department, the woman who had told me in my 3-month review that I had the most precise eye she had seen in a junior staff member in years. She arrived in the assessment room 12 minutes later, read Franklin's brief notes, looked at the watch under her own loupe for 6 uninterrupted minutes, and then sat back in her chair and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before. "Aaliyah," she said, "this is a reference 2526. "I know," I said. "With the original enamel dial." "I know." "Untouched." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Your grandfather paid $5 for this." "He paid $5 for this." Dr. Weston looked at Franklin. Franklin looked at the watch. A silence passed between them that contained a full conversation I was not part of, but could read perfectly. "We'll need to send it to our authentication lab in New York," Franklin said. "Standard process for a piece at this level, 4 to 6 weeks. But I want to be transparent with you. Based on what I'm seeing, I have no doubt about what this is." "What's the estimate?" I asked. Franklin picked up his pen. He wrote a number on a notepad and turned it toward me. $280,000 to $340,000. I looked at the number. I looked at the watch in its blue velvet box. I thought about Keisha's voice in the attorney's office in Galveston. "Is this even gold? Schedule the authentication," I said, "and I'd like to discuss auction placement." The authentication came back in 5 weeks. Every finding confirmed. Original reference 2526, Geneva hallmark, movement untouched, fully functional after a minor crown repair, enamel dial in exceptional condition. Franklin's written report used the word extraordinary twice in the same paragraph, which Dr. Weston told me later was almost without precedent in his professional vocabulary. Christie's scheduled the piece for their October fine watches sale. While the authentication was in process, something else happened that I had not fully anticipated. Dr. Weston called me into her office 3 weeks after the assessment room meeting. She sat across from me with a folder open on her desk and said she had been thinking about my position at Christie's for some time, that she had been watching my development not just as a catalog assistant, but as someone with genuine specialist level knowledge in a field where that knowledge was rare and difficult to acquire. That the authentication process for the Callaway piece, the documentation I had assembled, the provenance chain I had constructed, the historical research I had provided to support Franklin's assessment, had demonstrated a level of expertise that the catalog assistant job title no longer accurately reflected. She offered me a promotion to junior specialist watch and timepiece division. Salary increased to $54,000, client-facing responsibilities, my name on auction catalog entries. I accepted, calmly, professionally. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby road down alone, and stood on Post Oak Boulevard in the October Houston heat for approximately 90 seconds, doing nothing at all. Then I called Big Mama Odessa's number out of pure muscle memory, the number I had dialed every week for 15 years, and listened to it ring 3 times before I remembered. I stood there with the phone against my ear for a moment longer than made any rational sense. "I got it, Big Mama," I said to no one, to the dial tone, to the October air. "I got it." The weeks between the promotion and the October sale moved differently than weeks had moved before. I was sleeping better, eating more regularly. The studio apartment that had felt provisional, a temporary stop on the way to somewhere else, began to feel chosen. I bought a real dining table. I framed 2 prints for the wall, small things, but deliberate. My client consultation work had grown to 31 regular clients by October. 3 estate attorneys in Houston were routing watch-related probate work to me as a matter of course. A collector in Galveston, a retired maritime engineer named Darnell, who had known Big Mama Odessa through her neighborhood for 20 years, had become both a client and a friend. The kind of friendship built on shared knowledge and mutual respect, and the particular ease that comes from having nothing to prove to each other. Darnell had known Big Mama Odessa well. He told me once over coffee at his kitchen table in Galveston that she had talked about me for years, that she had described me to her friends the same way every time with the same words unprompted. She used to say, "My granddaughter has got the eyes and the patience. All she needs is the chance." I held my coffee cup with both hands and did not trust myself to speak for a moment. "She gave me the chance," I finally said. Darnell nodded. She knew she was giving it to the right person. The auction was scheduled for the 14th of October. 2 weeks out, I sat at my work table and addressed one envelope by hand. Heavy cream stock, the kind Christie's used for formal correspondence. Inside a single card, the auction details the lot number, the date, and time. I wrote the address in my best cursive. The handwriting Big Mama Odessa had complimented since I was 9 years old. Raymond Callaway, Sugarland, Texas. I sealed it. I stamped it. I walked to the post office on Westheimer and dropped it in the box myself. I did not send one to Cheryl. I did not send one to Keisha. Just Raymond. Because Raymond was the one who had stood in that backyard with a sandwich bag and a smile in front of 200 people and decided that was all I was worth. I wanted him in that room. I wanted him to see the number on that screen with his own eyes. The rest would take care of itself. The 14th of October arrived. The way important days always do, quietly, without announcement, looking exactly like every other morning until you are already inside it. I woke at 6:15. The apartment was still dark. I lay on my back for a few minutes and listened to the city outside, the particular early morning sound of Houston, the distant hum of the highway, a mockingbird somewhere below on the street doing its inventory of songs. I had slept well. Better than I had any right to expect given what the day was. I made coffee. I stood at the window with the mug in both hands and watched the light come up over the midtown rooftops, the slow orange shift that happens in October in Houston, when the humidity finally drops and the air turns transparent, and everything at dawn looks slightly more permanent than it did in summer. I thought about Big Mama Odessa standing at her own kitchen window in Galveston on Saturday mornings. The way she held her tea, the way she watched the street the same way I was watching mine, not looking for anything specific, just present, just bearing witness. I got dressed slowly and deliberately. A black dress I had bought 3 months earlier and saved for this occasion. Low heels. The single piece of jewelry I owned that had belonged to Big Mama Odessa, a small gold bracelet, Simple, worn smooth from decades of wear that I had found in the blue velvet box beneath the watch when I first opened it. A detail I had not mentioned to anyone. A detail I understood was not accidental. I arrived at Christie's 2 hours before the sale. The auction room on the second floor of the Post Oak Boulevard building held 220 seats, and by 9:30 it was already filling. Fine watch sales drew a specific kind of crowd: collectors, dealers, estate representatives, a contingent of international bidders who would participate by phone and online. The energy was contained and professional, the particular excitement of people who expressed enthusiasm through careful attention rather than noise. I checked in with Franklin Okafor at the specialist table near the entrance. He handed me my paddle bidder number 44, not that I intended to bid, and told me the Callaway piece was lot 47, scheduled approximately 90 minutes into the sale. He looked at me for a moment, with the measured expression I had come to associate with his form of genuine warmth. "You ready?" he asked. "Been ready?" I said. I took a seat in the fourth row from the back on the left side, with a clear sightline to both the podium and the main entrance. I wanted to see the room. I wanted to see who came through that door. For the first hour, I watched the sale proceed through the earlier lots. A 1962 Rolex Submariner in near mint condition, a set of 5 mid-century Omega dress watches from a Dallas estate, a 1948 Jaeger LeCoultre with an unusual dial configuration that drew spirited bidding from 3 phone lines simultaneously. The room was focused and quiet, in the way auction rooms are quiet, full of suppressed attention, everyone calibrating, everyone waiting for their particular moment. At 10:47, Raymond and Keisha walked through the door. I had expected Raymond. I'd sent only his invitation, addressed only to him, with no explanation. What I had not fully calculated was that Raymond Callaway did not, as a rule, go anywhere significant alone. He went places with an audience, someone to witness, someone to confirm that what he was doing was worth witnessing. He had brought Keisha. They stood at the entrance for a moment, Raymond in a dark suit, Keisha in a camel-colored blazer, both of them holding their Christie's programs and scanning the room with the particular expression of people who have arrived somewhere unfamiliar and are working to appear as though they haven't. Raymond's assistant had probably looked up the dress code. They had dressed correctly. They looked the part. They did not see me. I watched Raymond speak briefly to a Christie's staff member near the door, presumably asking about the seating arrangement. The staff member gestured toward the available seats in the back third of the room. Raymond and Keisha settled into a row near the right aisle, approximately 15 rows behind me, and slightly to my right within my peripheral vision if I turned my head, which I did not do. I turned back to the podium and waited. Lot 47 was introduced at 11:22. The auctioneer, a precise silver-haired man named Charles Whitfield, who had been running Christie's watch sales for 14 years, brought the gavel down on lot 46 and paused for exactly the right number of seconds before his assistant placed the next display card on the easel. "Lot 47, Charles Whitfield said. A Patek Philippe gentleman's wristwatch, reference 2526 Geneva, circa 1955. 18-karat yellow gold case. Original fired enamel dial in exceptional condition. Caliber 12600 SC movement, original and unrestored. Provenance Private Houston collection, acquired Geneva, Switzerland, 1955. The screen behind the podium displayed the watch in high resolution, the dial filling the full width of the projection, that white enamel with its faint cloud blue luminosity, the blued steel hands the case, catching the photography lighting at an angle that showed its age and its dignity simultaneously. The room shifted, not loudly, just a reorientation of attention, the way a room of careful people moves when something genuinely important enters it. "We will open bidding at $180,000. I did not turn around. I did not need to. I could feel the moment Raymond understood. The bidding opened. 3 paddles went up immediately, 2 in the room, 1 relayed from a phone bidder by a Christie's specialist at the side table. 180,000, 190, 210. The room bidders dropped out one by one as the number climbed, leaving 2 phone bidders competing through their respective specialists, the increment slowing as the number entered the upper range. 270,000, 290, 310. 330. The room was very quiet now, the particular quiet of people witnessing a number that commands respect. 330,000 bid online too. Do I have 340? A pause. The Christie's specialist on line 1 conferred briefly with their phone bidder, a 4-second silence that felt much longer. 340,000 bid on line 1. 340,000. Do I have 350 more? Line 2 specialist shook her head almost imperceptibly. Charles Whitfield raised his gavel. $340,000. Fair warning. 1 beat, 2 beats. Sold. Lot 47. $340,000. The gavel came down. The room responded the way auction rooms respond to exceptional results. Not with applause, exactly, but with a collective exhale, a murmur heads turning to neighbors, the quiet hum of people recalibrating what they had just witnessed. I sat completely still. $340,000. For a watch my grandfather had bought at a Geneva market stall for $5 in 1955. For a watch my father had given me in a crinkled sandwich bag as a joke in front of 200 people. For a watch my sister had called raggedy. I pressed Big Mama Odessa's bracelet against the inside of my wrist with 2 fingers and held it there. You were right, Big Mama. You were right about all of it. Then I stood up, smoothed my dress, picked up my program, and walked toward the specialist table to complete the post-sale paperwork. My heels were quiet on the carpeted floor. My back was straight. My face was composed. I was almost at the specialist table when I heard footsteps behind me, faster than the general movement of the room deliberate aimed. Aaliyah! Raymond's voice, close, lower than I expected. I stopped. I turned around slowly. My father was standing 3 feet away from me. His program was folded in his hand. Keisha stood just behind his right shoulder, her face unreadable, for once stripped of its usual performance. Just a woman looking at her sister in a room where the usual rules had stopped applying. Raymond's jaw was working slightly, the way it did when he was searching for language he hadn't prepared. His eyes went to the specialist table, to the paperwork with my name on it, to Franklin Okafor standing beside me, then back to my face. That was Mama's watch, he said. His voice had something in it I had not heard before. Something unsteady. That came from Mama's house. I looked at my father. I looked at him clearly and completely the way Big Mama Odessa had taught me to look at things without rushing, without flinching, without deciding in advance what I was going to see. Yes, I said, it was, and she gave it to me. Franklin Okafor read the room in approximately 2 seconds. He excused himself with the quiet professionalism of someone who understood that the most useful thing he could do in that moment was create space. He told me he would have the paperwork ready at the desk. Whenever I was ready, squeezed my arm once, a small deliberate gesture, and walked away. The Christie's staff near the specialist table drifted toward other business. The post-sale crowd flowed around us like water around 3 stones. Raymond, Keisha, and me. Can we talk somewhere? Raymond said. His voice was controlled now, the initial unsteadiness pulled back in. He was recalibrating. I recognized the process I had watched him do it my entire life, the way he gathered himself when a situation wasn't going the way he had arranged it. We can talk here, I said. He glanced at the people moving through the room. Aaliyah! Here is fine Dad. Keisha shifted her weight. She was looking at a point somewhere past my left shoulder, not avoiding my eyes, exactly more like someone who has realized mid-scene that they don't know their lines and is hoping the play will end before they're called on. Raymond straightened. He squared his shoulders the way he did at job sites when he needed to remind a room who was in charge. Old reflex. I watched it happen and felt nothing in particular about it. That money, he said, keeping his voice low, should go to the family. Mama would have wanted. Big Mama Odessa wrote down exactly what she wanted. I reached into my bag. I had brought a photocopy of the final page of the black notebook, not the original. The original was at home in a fireproof document box I had bought the week before, and I held it out to him. In her own handwriting, would you like to read it? Raymond looked at the paper. He did not take it. I know Mama's handwriting, he said. Then you know this is hers. A beat. Something moved across his face, not quite shame, not yet, but the shadow of it. The early light of a man beginning to understand the shape of something he had not previously been willing to see. Keisha spoke then, which surprised me. Her voice was different from her usual register of flatter, stripped of its social gloss. Aaliyah, that's $340,000. I'm aware. You can't just. She stopped, started again. We're family. I turned to look at my sister directly. I had not done that yet in this conversation. I had been focused on Raymond, the way you focus on the source of something rather than its effects. Now I looked at Keisha fully. The camel blazer? The pearl earrings she had been wearing at the will reading too. The face that looked like Cheryl's and had spent 33 years leveraging that resemblance in ways she perhaps didn't even fully understand she was doing. We are family, I said. That's true. She waited for the but. There was no but. I'm keeping the money, Keisha. All of it. Big Mama left it to me specifically because she understood exactly what she was leaving and exactly who she was leaving it to. I held up the photocopy one more time. She wrote it down. That's not ambiguous. You think money makes you better than us, Keisha said. Her voice had an edge now, not anger exactly, something more defensive than that. The sound of someone who has realized the ground has shifted and doesn't know how to stand on the new surface. No, I said. I just finally stopped thinking less of myself. That landed. I could see it land. Keisha looked away. Raymond was very still. It was Raymond I needed to finish with. Not Keisha. Keisha was a symptom, not the source. Raymond was where the pattern had started, and Raymond was where it needed to end. Dad, I said. I kept my voice even. Not cold. I had thought about this moment for weeks, and what I had decided somewhere between the auction invitation and this October morning was that I did not want to do this in anger. Anger was what happened when you still needed something from someone. I had stopped needing something from Raymond Calloway a long time ago. What I wanted now was clarity, just to say the true thing out loud in a room with him standing in front of me. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm not going to court. I'm not calling a lawyer. I'm not doing any of the things you're probably preparing yourself for. He watched me, waiting. Big Mama left this to me because I was the one who came to Galveston every month for 15 years on a bus with groceries to sit at her table and learn what she knew. You sent a Christmas card. You called on her birthday. You showed up when it was convenient. I paused. I'm not saying you didn't love her. I know you loved her. But she knew the difference between loving someone and showing up for them. And she left accordingly. Raymond's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something sharp. The Raymond Calloway I had grown up with would have said something sharp, would have reasserted himself, would have found a way to reframe the conversation so that he emerged from it with his position intact. Instead, he was quiet. The silence lasted long enough to mean something. There's one more thing I want to say, I continued. And then I'm done. I reached into my bag a second time and removed one more piece of paper. Not a photocopy. A printed page, a Texas Monthly article, 3 weeks old, a brief mention in the culture section about an upcoming exhibition of privately owned vintage timepieces being organized by a young Houston-based specialist. My name was in the third paragraph. I held it out to Raymond. This time he took it. He read it. His eyes moved slowly down the page. I watched him find my name. I watched him read the sentence that followed it. Aaliyah Calloway, a rising specialist in the Houston antique watch market, brings a rare combination of academic rigor and hands-on expertise to a field that has historically been... He stopped reading. He folded the paper slowly along its original crease and held it in both hands. I'm opening my own firm, I said. Calloway and Associates Fine Timepieces. I'm signing the lease next week. Upper Kirby. I held his gaze. I kept the Calloway name. Not for you, not for the family, for Big Mama, because it was her name first and she earned it. Raymond looked at the folded paper in his hands, then at me, then at the paper again. Something was happening behind his eyes that I could not fully read and did not try to. I was not responsible for what Raymond Calloway did with this moment. I was only responsible for saying the true thing clearly, and then stepping back. I'm going to finish my paperwork now, I said. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the sale if you'd like. Christie's has good coffee. I turned and walked to the specialist table. I did not look back. Behind me, I heard nothing for a long moment. No footsteps, no voice, no movement. Just the ambient sound of the auction room resettling around the three of us, the way rooms resettle when something that has been held in tension is finally released. Then quietly, I heard Raymond say something to Keisha, too low to make out the words. Then footsteps not toward me, but toward the exit. 2 sets of them, growing fainter. I sat down at the specialist table across from Franklin Okafor. He slid the post-sale paperwork across the felt surface. I picked up the pen. My hand was completely steady. Everything okay?" Franklin asked quietly without looking up from his own paperwork. "Yeah," I said. "Everything is exactly what it needed to be." I drove home alone that evening. No music. The windows down the October air clean and dry and moving through the car the way Gulf air moves after a front comes through purposeful, like it knows where it's going. I thought about Big Mama Odessa's last letter. "You were never the one who needed fixing." They were. I thought about what it had taken me 29 years to understand that her love had never been conditional, had never required me to be lighter or louder or more convenient or more legible, to people who had already decided what I was worth. She had seen me from the beginning. She had been patient. She had put everything she knew and everything she had into a blue velvet box and waited for the right time. I thought about what she used to say after church on the drive back to Galveston. "Baby God don't waste nothing he put in you." I pressed my hand flat against the steering wheel and felt the hum of the road underneath it. No Big Mama, I thought. He doesn't. I drove home alone that night, and for the first time in my life, alone felt like exactly enough. 14 months have passed since that October afternoon. I am writing this from my office in Upper Kirby, Houston. The space is small 400 square feet, a front room for client consultations, and a back room for assessment work. The walls are warm white. The lighting is controlled and even. On the assessment table in the back room sits the same folding table I bought at the Salvation Army 6 years ago. Refinished, now given a proper felt surface, but the same table. I kept it on purpose. Some things deserve to be carried forward. On the shelf above the consultation desk in a custom glass case sits a small gold watch, white enamel dial, blued steel hands, the hairline scratch near the crown that I will never have removed. Beside it, mounted in a simple frame, is a single page of handwriting, Big Mama Odessa's cursive slightly slanted to the right, the ink slightly different from the pages before it. "You were never the one who needed fixing. Every client who sits across from me reads it eventually. Most of them don't ask about it. The ones who do, I tell them it was written by the woman who taught me everything I know." That is true. It is also not the whole story, but it is enough for a consultation room. Callaway & Associates Fine Timepieces opened its doors on a Monday morning in December, 8 weeks after the Christie's auction. I signed the Upper Kirby lease the week after the confrontation with Raymond, as I had told him I would. The business name was registered with the state of Texas the same afternoon. The response surprised me not because I doubted the work, but because I had spent so many years operating in rooms where my expertise was noted, and then quietly set aside that I had underestimated what it would feel like to operate in a room that was entirely mine. By February, I had 22 active clients. By April, 38. By June, a feature in the Houston Chronicle's lifestyle section, the timepiece whisperer of Upper Kirby, brought in 11 new inquiries in a single week. By October, 1 year after the auction, I had completed 44 private authentications, consulted on 3 estate probate cases, and been invited to contribute a chapter to a reference volume on mid-century Swiss watchmaking being compiled by a professor at Rice University. None of this happened because of $340,000 auction dollars, though those dollars mattered, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. They bought the lease, the build-out, the equipment, 6 months of operating costs, and a cushion that meant I could say no to work that wasn't right, and yes to opportunities that were. Money is infrastructure. Big Mama Odessa understood that. So did her grandfather Joseph, standing at a market stall in Geneva in 1955 with $5 in his pocket and the eyes to see what everyone else was walking past. The rest happened because of 15 years of Saturday mornings in Galveston, because of 43 pages in a black notebook, Because of a woman who decided before I was old enough to decide for myself that I was worth seeing. My relationship with Raymond is what it is. He has not called to dispute the auction proceeds. I did not expect him to, not because he let go of it easily, but because Harold Beaumont Big Mama Odessa's attorney had been thorough. The will was unambiguous. The documentation was complete. Raymond is a practical man. He understood when a position was untenable. He texted me in January. 4 words, I see you doing well. I read it 3 times. I thought about responding for 2 days. In the end, I wrote back 2 words I am. Not warm, not cold. True. That is where we are. I do not know if it will become more than that. I am not holding the door open or pulling it shut. I am simply living in the present tense, which is something I could not have done a year ago. Cheryl called once in March. The conversation lasted 11 minutes and covered in order the whether Keisha's new job title, a church fundraiser at New Hope Baptist, and a carefully indirect inquiry into whether I might consider coming to Easter dinner. I was polite throughout. I told her I had plans for Easter. I did not specify what plans. She did not push. Keisha and I have not spoken since the auction room. I am at peace with that. I hold no particular anger toward my sister. She was shaped by the same house I was shaped by, and she made different choices with the same raw material. That is hers to reckon with, not mine. Darnell comes by the office on Wednesday afternoons when he is in Houston for supplies. Oh, he brings coffee from a place on Westheimer that he insists is the best in the city, and we sit in the consultation room and talk about watches and Galveston and Big Mama Odessa and the specific generous way she had of paying attention to people. He knew her for 30 years. There are things he tells me that I did not know. I am always glad to know them. He told me once that Big Mama Odessa had kept a photograph on her nightstand for years. Not of Raymond, not of the whole family, but a single photograph of me at 16, sitting at her work table, loop on my eye, completely absorbed in whatever movement I was examining. She had taken it without my knowing. In the photo, apparently, I look entirely at home. She used to point at that photo, Darnell said, whenever anybody asked her what she was most proud of. I did not trust myself to speak for a moment. Just the photo? I finally asked. No explanation. He smiled. Just the photo. She said the picture explained itself. I keep a copy of it now on my phone. I look at it sometimes when the work is hard or the day is long. This 16-year-old girl with a loop on her eye, completely unaware she is being watched completely. Herself completely enough. Big Mama Odessa saw her. Long before she saw herself. That is the real inheritance. Not $340,000, not the Upper Kirby lease or the Christie's catalog entries or the Rice University chapter. The real inheritance is the knowledge that someone who loved me clearly and without condition looked at what I was before I had credentials, before I had a title, before I had anything. The world considers evidence of value and decided I was worth everything she knew. I think about that on the hard days. I think about the 16-year-old girl at the work table, absorbed and unaware and entirely at home. I think she was always enough. She just needed someone to show her where to look. I'm Leah Calloway, and that is my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever been the one in your family who was handed the sandwich bag while someone else got the Rolex, I want you to know something. Your worth is not determined by who sees it. But sometimes, if you are very lucky, someone sees it before you do, and they find a way to make sure you cannot miss it forever. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. If this story meant something to you, please hit that like button and subscribe. I would love to hear from you. Have you ever had someone in your life who saw your worth before you did? How did that change you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this one, check out the video in the description. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it. You.